On June 18, 2013, Fred Delicious tweeted, "Sir, can I ask why you're smoking 2 huge blunts?" Officer, I'm, turns to camera, double jointed. Cop starts breakdancing. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. I think if you were to ask people who were around for Weird Twitter what the quintessential Weird Twitter tweet was, I think the majority answer would be Cop starts breakdancing. Brain Death here says Hall of Fame tweet, potentially GOAT status. But I think Sunshine Jarbali says it best with, "I saw the original Star Wars as a child. I remember the opening scene, the rebel ship, the Star Destroyer filling the screen. No one ever saw anything like this. It was mind-blowing." This tweet was the Star Wars of Twitter all those years ago. It was the most iterated on and referenced weird Twitter joke for like 3 years. And it still is referenced today, but there really was a time where this tweet had a hold over a whole subsection of Twitter. And so it was my great pleasure to be able to talk to the great Fred Delicious, that is of course not his actual name, but I talked to Fred Delicious about this tweet, about how big it got, about weird Twitter in general. Now this is a much cut down interview. I'm actually going to put the whole interview, which is about 15 minutes, on my Patreon, so you can watch that in full. We talk about weird Twitter generally. It was a great conversation, but let's go to that because he really breaks it down. There was a lot of jokes like this being tweeted on weird Twitter at the time. What do you think it was about this one that made it become like, definitely I think the biggest tweet for you, and I feel like it is such a emblematic tweet of weird Twitter. What do you think it was about this?
So I think with this tweet, because I mean, I remember when I tweeted this out, it didn't seem like it was a big tweet. You know, it was that sort of era of sort of Twitter when everyone was just like, for want of a better phrase, shit posting and just seeing what sort of sticks. And I remember like tweeting this out, and I think for me, it sort of encapsulates where, and I know a lot of people hate the phrase weird Twitter, but it's what it's sort of known as now, isn't it? You know, weird Twitter. I think it sort of encapsulates everything that was going on at that period, right? Because it had what people called like the line breaks. It had like the asterisk. It obviously had like the looks to camera thing because there was that whole breaking the fourth wall thing that everyone used to do with their tweets. And of course, like, at the surface, it's just a stupid pun. Do you know what I mean? It's just a stupid pun. But then I had some characters left at the end. I remember having characters left, and I thought, well, because back then, obviously, like the Twitter character limit was 140 characters. So to have like a bit left at the end of writing a tweet out, it was like a bit of a bonus. And I just thought, what's the most stupid thing I could put in here? And for whatever reason, I thought, well, it'd be funny if the cop started dancing, you know, authority figure dancing. And it was as simple as that. And I hit send, and I remember it was quite late at night, and it just started going crazy, and people started like quoting like this, you know, X starts breakdancing, and it became a thing for ages. But for me, the reason it sort of took off, like I say, it just encapsulated that little everything that was going on in weird Twitter at that time, you know. And it's like you say, I don't think it's by no means like, I don't think it's the best thing I ever tweeted, but it's obviously probably the one that I am sort of best known for, and I think that's the reason.
Yeah, because I think it almost feels like the cop starts breakdancing to me always felt like an acknowledgement of like, this is dumb, and like this is just kind of, you know, like a little silly coda at the end.
Without that last bit, it's just an awful pun, and like it doesn't even make sense, because like one of the things that people always really got angry about with that tweet was the fact that it was like, you know, like blunts and joints aren't even the same thing. It doesn't even make sense as far as like weed goes. But the reason I had to do it like that is because I couldn't say joint up front, because then obviously I couldn't then use joint in the punchline, so I had to use a different word. And I you know, so perhaps if I could go back, I'd make sure it was like, you know, it had the correct sort of like weed terms, which it doesn't. But I don't know. Maybe that's another reason where like people sort of argued about it in the comments about the fact that it didn't even make sense. Maybe that's why, you know, it took off as well like it did.
I think that I find hard to explain to people who weren't on Twitter at the time about weird Twitter is that most of the accounts were not under people's real names, but it wasn't people tweeting as characters. Like, I'm like, this was Fred Delicious, but Fred Delicious wasn't a character. It was just like a persona. How do you make sense of that? Especially now, as I feel like that's not really a thing that much anymore. Everyone's, you know, tweeting basically as themselves, even if they don't go by their real name.
Being anonymous on Twitter, it's like a blessing and a curse, because if you are going into it like we used to on weird Twitter, to just make stupid little jokes, you know, I mean, you know, a lot of people, like, we were just, what we were tweeting was quite innocent in a way. It was like, you know, just about stupid, you know, it was all grammatically incorrect. It was all like, you know, we probably spoke in a way that like was less intelligent than we speak in real life. And like, you know, obviously like, if our employers or whatever at the time had seen us tweeting like these ridiculous things, you know, so it was nice to have that sort of anonymity. And yeah, so I think also because everyone was sort of anonymous, even though it wasn't like people playing to characters for the most part, it meant people pushed the sort of the envelope a little bit more. Do you know what I mean? People were a bit more daring with what they would tweet. And I mean, Yeah, I've got really fond memories of sort of like between 2012 and 2016, and there was just all these like this whole range of like exciting characters, whether it was like a cartoon mouse or obviously, I was just like a pink face, and there was just all these like really recognizable sort of, like you say, characters that weren't characters, just
Yeah.
tweeting absolute nonsense.
Yeah, and is there a, like, because people riffed on Cop Starts Breakdancing a ton, is there one that sticks out to you that you think like, oh, this is a really, or like this is a crazy that it was referenced here, or this is the really funny example? If the answer is no, I'll cut this question out.
Yeah, I would say no. I think because it was always referenced. It was like, but quite, it was probably split. Like a lot of people would use cop start, like X starts breakdancing as just the end to any tweet or whatever.
Yeah,
and people also, because like I don't know if you remember, but back in the day, like especially after when weird Twitter as a phrase first came out, there was an article. I don't know if you remember. This was 2012, maybe early 2013. There was an article, and I can't even remember who did it now, but there was a few of the old, the guys. There was a guy called Hell Homer. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah.
And there was a guy called Meep, and there was like this sort of like, they did sort of like sort of interviews, and it was in that article that it was referred to as weird Twitter. And then the people that had been there from the very start, like John Hendren and all those guys who came over from the Something Awful forums, I think a lot of people took exception to the fact that it had a label all of a sudden. And I think the fact that it had the label made it seem uncool to some people. And, still even nowadays, like calling it weird Twitter, I still cringe a bit because, especially when I say it out loud, because I remember like how everyone hated calling it weird Twitter back in the day.
I think you're right that it really was kind of just like X Starts Breakdancing really became a symbol of like, this is a half-baked joke and I need to get out of it. Which in that way, like, I think is a great legacy to have, but it's also, it's why like nothing really tops that original. Like I said, Fred and I went like 15 minutes talking about old weird Twitter moments, old weird Twitter controversies. So please subscribe to my Patreon if you want to see all that. It was a really fun conversation. Beyond direct parodies, which I'll get to, the phrase "cop starts breakdancing" is just a phrase that people who are on weird Twitter at the time use. Like Fred references it himself all the time. In 2023, he tweeted, "You couldn't even have a cop that starts breakdancing nowadays. You would be canceled for suggesting that." I'm not 100% sure what Kelsey D. Atherton means by this, but they tweeted, "Truly, we have entered the cop starts breakdancing era of politics." And Jake Flores quoted a video of Kamala Harris dancing in the rain with the phrase "cop starts breakdancing." This is, of course, in 2020 when it was very fashionable to call her a cop. As for full-on parodies, here are a couple quick examples. I swear, there are so many. Dubstep for Dads, another weird Twitter legend, tweeted, "Chief Keef addresses nation. Aight, so we cut in taxes by like, audience listens in. 300. Obama starts breakdancing." Donnie tweets, "Looking up at the stars. Good night, Moon. Good night. Whoa, did you just talk? That's not the only thing I can do. Moon starts breakdancing." And Glenn Lowry tweeted, "Knock knock. Who's there? Crimea. Crimea who? Haha, Vlad, let us in. Glares. Crimea who? Sighs. Crimea River. Putin starts breakdancing." Blind Chow tweeted, "Can I ask why you have two huge spouts?" The cup asked the teapot. "It's so I can." Looks at camera. "Double dribble. Cup starts breakdancing." See, some of these are full-on parodies where the things are just swapped out, like the one with a cup, and some of these are dumb puns where a person or an object starts breakdancing to get out of the joke. I think the thing that might not come across in hindsight is that there was a lot of self-awareness about how dumb it was to end a joke with "X starts breakdancing." I'm sure that there are imitators who didn't realize that that's not actually funny on its own merits, but I feel like most of the time, putting "X starts breakdancing" at the end of a joke was an acknowledgement of like, yeah, this isn't that good. And for that reason, I always appreciated it. If only someone came up with a punchline to snappily and quickly end a TikTok video, but it doesn't exist yet. Follow me for a new tweet every day. Please subscribe at patreon.com/museum of Twitter. And I am doing a charity fundraising live stream for the Trevor Project to support LGBTQ youth on the 22nd. All the information can be found on my Twitter or Blue Sky. Please donate ahead of time. I have a couple of pre-stream goals and some giveaways. I'm actually be giving away some signed copies of tweets. So yeah, please do that and tune in if you can.